Back to another episode of the Deductionist podcast, my lords, ladies, and gentlemen. Patrick Jane is already here. Welcome, sir. Welcome. Nice to see you. Good to hear you, that you've been thinking about it all day. I have a visual puzzle for you all. Oh, I don't. That was just I've been playing with a coin while the countdown was on, and it's a puzzle that you've seen many times before anyway. So welcome back, welcome back, welcome back. You will notice, or rather, I hope you noticed that there wasn't an episode last week. Yeah, there wasn't an episode last week. It was a fairly um, impromptu decision, but such is my life at the minute. Such is my life. These glasses have a slight tint to them. It's it's sunny over here. Well, I say it's getting on for 20 past 7 in the evening, but it's sunny over here in the UK now. So I've got my transitions lenses on to cope with that. What is that I have on my shirt? I don't know where that came from. It's sticky. Anyway, don't know what that is or where it came from, but that is what it is. maybe it's from my lemon water. Who knows? Uh, but that's a digression. Anyway, here we go. Last week, I couldn't do the session. I had so many things going on, and it's fast becoming that this is my life. I know. Oh, woe is me! I'm so busy. What a first world problem to have. But this is the case, right? This is the case. This is where we are. So, just to kind of let you guys know where I am ahead of time, I am having to consider moving this back to once every 2 weeks. I've not landed on a decision around that yet, but just so we can garner some kind of regularity in scheduling and, everyone can make sure that they are here when they want to be. That's a consideration that I'm having to go through at the moment. Like I'm off to America again for work in a few days. I know, oh, woe is me, isn't your life tech? But when you have as many differing requirements for your time, in a virtual process, whether it be, classes or the podcast or work or whatever it is. Not that classes and the podcast isn't work, but you know what I'm saying? It's the different types. These are considerations that I have to make in order to make sure that I can see you guys on a regular basis. So there we are. Just so you know where I am, that is a consideration that I'm thinking about at the moment. I haven't achieved any kind of um, decision one way or the other in terms of how I'm going to go about it. But I want to make sure that I can get back to the weekly YouTube videos as well as these podcasts. So that would certainly free up the gift of time. I should be able to get them together with space and make a continuum, um, which isn't true. That was just my opportunity of paraphrasing a Chandler Bing line. Well, I'm glad that you came with me on this. Okay, so here we are. Let's talk about the ethics of deduction, the ethics involved in people reading, right? And it should be a consideration. It should be, because we are, in essence, regardless of the kind of degree of descriptive words that we would use, we are, in essence, training ourselves to be able to see that which the general populace either attempts to hide or doesn't make known. And that's an important decision that we need to get clear first of all, right? That very oftentimes when we look at starting out in this particular way of working, there is a bias that readily presents itself. Just because you're going to be much more aware of things that are going on, you're going to see things or you're not going to see things. So it automatically brings in this dichotomy of I'm going to be aware of something or I'm going to see what somebody is trying to hide from me. It's never as black and white as that, first of all. So that's where the ethical considerations have to come in that particular moment, right? There is a difference between somebody hiding something from you and somebody just not showing you something, right? And I've cited the kind of body language analogy many times, but it is it is particularly relevant. And you know, given my kind of juvenile sense of humor, it makes it sound like it is nothing more than a jokey analogy, but it's true. The short version of it is on observing a group of people talking about, you know, lies and deception and body language and how to spot it. One of the people in the group started to look all coy and nervous and step back and checking to see who was behind them, stop talking, and then when the topic changed, they relaxed, and you know it moved with it. So there would be those that would go, oh, he's hiding something, or he's closed off, or he's being protective, or whatever it is. Simply put, all that had happened is he farted. That is it. Sounds like I'm just making a joke, but it is distinctly true. That was a situation that I had observed and was a part of. And as is a probable verifiable question that you have in your head, was I the farter? No, I was the fartee. Is that the right way of looking at that? I don't really know. My English skills are kind of lapsing in judgment there. But, right, just as electricians train themselves to be aware of electrical problems before anybody else outside of that knowledge has an awareness, just as personal trainers train themselves to be aware of physical and dietary problems outside of anyone else's awareness before it's brought into them. Our scope of awareness in this particular field is designed to encapsulate everything. So I used to open my talks uh, uh, when it was in a slightly more performative concept with saying, your thoughts, I see them. Your secrets, I know them. Your hidden motivations, I can bring to the light. Because it was done for a kind of jokey concept to set some kind of dramatic tear and dramatic flair and dramatic tension. The same is applicable towards the reality based concepts around this. That's what we are training ourselves to see, or notice, or critically think, or deduce, or read into, right? We are training ourselves to be people that are aware of things that nobody else is. So, with that has to come some kind of ethical considerations, and it's been on my mind since I got these. Now, these are the Ray-Ban Metas. So there's a camera built into the frame. I mean, it's great for my focus and tension and attention because I can listen to books and podcasts through the stem. That's a whole other thing. But like when I'm taking training videos, for example, when I'm out and about and I'm practicing and I'll take a training video to use in class, there is an ethical consideration of me seeing things naturally in the moment that the average person isn't aware of because they don't know I've got a camera in here. There are ethical considerations that have to come along with that. So we are training ourselves to kind of be really nosy, right? If you want to think of it that way. So we have to take into account whether the information that we are making ourselves aware of is worth in the moment bringing to the light, right? And just if you can hear any background noise, this fan is on, and I refuse to turn it off. So I respectfully to you guys listening, I don't even care if the audio's harmed. by that fan being on. It is far too warm for me to not have it on. So there it is. But with us being aware of so much, we then have to raise the question of what do we use? What do we act upon? What do we validate, dismiss, or clarify further? What do we explore? What do we declare as irrelevant or not connected to what it is that we're working on? There are a degree of nuances that need to be taken into account with why it is that we are even observing someone or something in the first place. Right, that is something that has to be taken aware of, right? So if I'm in a surrounding where I have to figure out if Joe Blogs is the best person to be hired by this company, right? I could be in a bar setting and see him, I don't know, leering at every young woman that passes by, drinking too much, smoking, shouting at the football on the TV. And my ethical question around that is morally, I want a focused and attentive and aware and respectful individual that works for this company. But in that moment, my ethical considerations are directly arguing, in essence, with my morality, my biases, and anything else that is affecting my emotional qualities in that particular time. Because if I'm to assess for the way that this guy would work for the particular company, I need to frame the proper indications of the context in that moment. So this might have been this guy's end of a 90-hour work week. He might have just found out one of his parents had died. He might have just gotten some kind of news that requires a blowout or something along that, that deeply personal edge, which is why we are seeing that kind of behavior. It connects towards singular events. It connects towards the whole baselining angle of information, the ethics of us noticing something. Just because we notice something that nobody else does not mean that by default it has actionable data towards our particular purpose in that moment. Right? That is a point for consideration. So just because you notice that Ben's wearing different glasses, and just because you recognize them as the Ray-Ban Metas, does that ultimately mean that I am taking some kind of video or some kind of um, photograph of whatever it is that's going on around me? Your ethics should directly connect to your capacity to jump to conclusions. Because if you knew about the requirements for this, I don't know if it will translate on the camera, but I'll try and point it at you if I take a picture. You see the light? That's to let people know that they're in use, right? Which is, if you're aware of the model but not aware of the nuances, this is where your biases start to come into the fore, because surface level information. You cognitively refuse to press it any deeper, just to see, out of curiosity, which brings forward this ethical consideration of why it is that you're looking in the first place, right? So this will be a fairly short discussion around the ethics of deduction. But just because you notice something that nobody else does not mean that it's actionable. Right? It is in the same vein that I've spoken to over my years of work and friends, many a couple, that just because one party has noticed that the other person tends to put their phone face down on a table as opposed to face up, automatically means that they're hiding something. And we are just now getting back to the realms of that body language myth of if they fold their arms, they're disconnected. You know, if they slow eye block, they're disagreeing, whatever it is. This kind of I've seen this, therefore this analogy. And if you consider the ethics of what it is that you're noticing, it should by default make you more aware of the implications of you getting involved in a stream of data that either didn't take stock of your ability to be there, didn't account for your ability to be there, or doesn't need your ability to be there, right? It is when you look at I'm going to get quite theoretical, quite theological. When you look at the way that time travel is spoken about, if you were to look at a past event, the past event wouldn't be the truest account of the past event because you're looking at it. Right? If that original event had occurred and whatever had happened in that particular moment, then blah blah blah, you go on. Time travel is invented, and then you look back. This is now a different event because you're new data. So the ethics of you getting involved need to be considered in line with your purpose and your why. Right? Because if I notice, an argument or something that's coming up between a couple, and I go and get involved with the best intentions of helping them with it, right? If you look at game theory or chess, or any kind of strategic battle analysis, I've presented myself as a new party for two previously opposing forces to converge on. So it's not a truest account of that. So just because you notice something does not mean you then have the right to act or get involved in some way. It is just something that you notice. But by default, if you operate with that particular standpoint, you become a kind of data mining machine when you get in line the previous kind of triune connections of a proper mindset and get your memory involved in what it is. I've noticed that such and such a person only eats this meal on this day. I've noticed that this person tends to complain about his wife on these particular days. I've noticed that this woman tends to complain about her husband on these days, whatever it is, right? The patterns that exist can speak to us, and it's information that we can use when it's called for us to be able to use it. Just because we are aware of something does not mean that we can get involved, because in getting involved, that which we have observed is no longer the purest sense of that particular piece of information because we are involved, right? If you've ever seen the video of these Karens, and what's the male Karen called? Is it Ken? My love? Oh, sorry. What's the male Karen called? Is it a Ken? All right, fair enough. I didn't know if you would know. Yeah, well, male Karens then. Let's call it. I wasn't. I'm pretty sure that I'd seen a name attached to his. I mean, anyway, I'm sure Ryan Gosling would be very upset to know Ken's name was taken in vain. Anyway, but you see when these people are freaking out at service people or squealing at someone unnecessarily, then there's this kind of back and forth between someone behind a counter and somebody squealing. Then somebody else gets involved Darren, thank you, to try and be whether it is to try and help, to try and be the white knight, to whatever it is, then the situation is now different because there are three people in a situation that was automatically just involving the two in that perceived reality. When a new piece of information is involved, it's now three things, and everything has to be reevaluated and reread because it is a different situation to what you observed. You observed a situation with two people. Now you're getting involved. It is three. So that changes it. That is an ethical consideration that you have to make as somebody who is trained to notice things that other people are not. Right? And this is why I'm consistently on all of my students, on all of my friends, on all of the people that I work with, on all of the companies that I have worked for. Biases are everywhere. And the more you are aware of your own, the better equipped you are to make sure that your reads of situations and scenarios are as effective as they could be, because you are aware of them. There is no inherently right or wrong way of going about it. I know tons of people who are aware of the biases that they have, but refuse to do anything about it because of some kind of moral or personal connection that they have towards the way that they want to live their life. And that is 100% fine. This is the ethical part. This is 100% fine. As long as they are aware that these are biases that will harm their effectiveness in the moment. Just as there are people, the other side of that, that go running at biases to find out, mitigate, boom. But then that becomes a bias in and of itself. So if I'm consistently going, hey, right, that exploratory sense is great for personal reward, but it's still robbing you of your presence in the moment. Ethics and effectiveness require this kind of continual ambiguous bubble, this kind of flexible rotary device of taking in information and seeing if this is correlating to something else, and then taking it in somewhere and seeing if it's correlating towards something else, just to keep moving and finding new data. That is what we're doing. So that's the kind of information I want you to consider moving forward in your reads of people and scenarios and things, the ethics around whether this situation needs you to get involved or whether you want to get involved for some kind of ego or training or whatever it is. But the more you are aware of what it is that's motivating you to interact with this piece of information in the first place, the better equipped you will be able to understand its truest sense, its truest communicative properties in the moment. Which is why most body language videos on the internet fall foul, because they rarely take account of this. They rarely take account of it. And I'm not saying that nobody does, because I haven't watched them all. There are thousands. But it's rarely taken account of. Rarely taken account of. So the ethics of spotting something in a particular moment and considering its particular implications towards what it is that you or the group that you're talking to or interacting with, what it is that you're doing, pursuant to your purpose and your reason for being there. All right, guys. So as I said, short one this week, but that's because the topic of this ethical conduct, let's call it, is not a topic with a great deal of breadth, but it is a topic with a great deal of depth. If you look at the 9 standards of thought in terms of depth and breadth, right, there are particular aspects that we need to consider. So I can give you the insights to the topic at the surface level in a short space of time because they're not very wide. But the depth of their implication needs to be considered and chopped and changed and made new and fitting to every situation, every context, every moment that you get involved in. All right, guys, so with that in mind, I am going to love you and leave you, and I will see you next week. For now, for another episode. All right, guys, take it easy.